The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on February 10th, 2026.
Welcome to Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And now here's your host, the president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, Pam Tumpop. Good morning, Pam. How are you today?
Good morning, Gary. I am doing well up in Pukalani today. We got a lot of needed rain. How are you this morning?
Same here. A lot of needed rain. They didn't have to break out my snorkel or anything, though, but it was good rain.
Well, I don't know about downtown, but up country anyway, the winds were whipping so much it was a little hard to sleep some nights. But anyway, that's the least of my problems.
Yeah, the wind at my house wasn't that bad, so I'm glad about that. That's the whole thing I worry about most is the wind, not really the rain.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Well, I'm glad we've got a beautiful day and we're moving forward. And thank you for all you do, Gary, for the show.
Thank you for what you do for the community.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Well, this morning we have Caitlin Miller on, and she's in Lahaina, and she's actually without power. So she's had a bit of a rougher time with the wind, but everybody is doing okay there. And Caitlin serves as the visionary executive director of the Hawaii Mid and Short-Term Rental Alliance. It's known as HIMAST. You know, we have to have an acronym for everything here, and that's really important because there's so many organizations to know about. And she is a dedicated leader and strategic collaborator. Caitlin leads the statewide coalition across Maui, Lanai, Molokai, Oahu, Kauai, and Hawaii Island. She is a tireless advocate for vacation rental owners, property managers, local small businesses, and the communities across the islands that form the heartbeat of Hawaii's unique culture. Caitlin was the driving force behind unifying the state's regional associations under HIMAST banner because, you know, there's been so much going on in this arena. By fostering unprecedented collaboration, she has elevated industry advocacy into a sophisticated, data-driven dialogue, ensuring that the voices of her community are heard and respected at both the county and state levels. Her leadership is defined by a commitment to transparency, sustainable growth, and the protection of local livelihoods. She is also a proud resident of West Maui. She lives with her husband, Brandon, and their dog, Koa. Her professional drive is mirrored by her personal discipline. She spends her time outside the policy arena training at her local gym. And whether she is navigating complex legislation or competing at high-level fitness events, Caitlin embraces a lifelong passion for wellness, resilience, and personal growth. Aloha and good morning, Caitlin.
Aloha, Pam. Thank you so much for having me today. And thanks for that awesome introduction. Thank you.
Oh, it is my great pleasure. I'm so glad to, hear about this organization. You and I got to talk about it briefly at the legislature during opening week at the Ledge. But this is really an exciting time in the industry. There's just been so much fragmentation in the industry. Can you explain what's changed with this merger of several county organizations and why that really matters for Maui's business community as well as the overall industry in the state?
Absolutely, Pam. Thanks so much for that question. So most people who might be listening to this would know me as the executive director for Maui Vacation Rental Association, which was my title prior to the merger that we completed in December. So over the last few years, we formed Hawaii Mid and Short-Term Rental Alliance through the other county coalition groups. So that includes Kauai, Oahu, and Hawaii Island. And through that, we really learned that just how fragmented we are, right? And how many things continue to change and how much legislation is being put forth that lawmakers might not necessarily understand all of the nuances and the impact to the local community in terms of economy and jobs and livelihoods for small businesses. So we made a concerted effort over the last year and a half, really as a result of Senate Bill 2919, which passed in 2024, And as a result of Bill 9 here on Maui, to really make a concerted effort to bring those groups together. Because what we saw out of all of that legislation was a lot of misinformation coming out into the public, into the community, and on the news. And we wanted to make sure that we could have a more unified, coordinated effort that includes accountability, transparency, and clear dialogue with our government officials and business stakeholders. So as it relates to Maui specifically, it means discussions are really no longer reactive and siloed, right? So we're talking about what the broader community looks like, what those jobs look like, and how our business as an industry of short-term rentals both directly and indirectly impacts the economy. So it's more strategic and statewide, and obviously what happens here on Maui impacts what happens on Oahu and Hawaii Island and so forth. And so really becoming more strengthen and our credibility and voice for both the industry and the other industries that we help represent.
Well, first of all, I'm so glad to hear this. And again, as you mentioned, we've gone through Bill 9. There were so many challenges with that. There was so much messaging. It really started early on, actually, with a planning commission review and just voices coming out and just speaking out against this industry in such a strong way, without, again, the understanding of the broader economic impacts and all of the different jobs and careers that it impacted. So I'm so excited about this organization coming together. And just as an acronym, I absolutely love HIMAST. I think that's a good one. I love that came together with an acronym of HIMAST, just because it's easy to remember. So, as you're going through this work, and as you talk about the messaging and the importance of unifying on that messaging to help with the understanding and looking at the broader economic impacts, there's still a lot of confusion around, especially on Maui, about how many short-term rentals are actually illegal versus long-standing legally permitted units. Can you clarify this distinction and why it's important in policy discussions?
Absolutely. So the first thing is that MBRA, HIMAST, and the rest of the county organizations operating under HIMAST, we all believe in regulations and people operating legally within the space. We don't support illegal short-term rentals. We agree, just like with everyone else, that there should be regulations in place, in order to keep our community safe and the businesses moving forward and make sure that it's a trusted accommodation sector and industry within the state of Hawaii. So I think that that's important to realize, but there really is a critical difference between long-standing, legally permitted units and truly illegal operations. So many units, discussed during Bill 9 specifically, if we want to use that as an example, are long-standing, legally operating properties for decades. We're talking 40 to 50 years in some cases that these properties have been operating as legal short-term rentals. So I think where some of the confusion comes from on the numbers is that we have really reliable state data through Department of Business and Economic Development, DBET for short. DBET produces reports every single year, which breaks down, accommodations across the state, not just hotels and short-term rentals, but timeshares and all of the sectors. If you look at those numbers are extremely consistent with the numbers and what we quote most frequently. So when someone comes out and says, oh, there's 30,000 illegal short-term rentals in Maui County. And I'm like, well, there's barely that many across the state, let alone just in Maui County. And if you look at the DBET report, it will show you there's just over 13,000 short-term rentals here in Maui County. As we know, are now intimately aware, about 7,100 of those comprise of the Minatoya list, which is what the Bill 9 legislation was particularly targeting as a result of that. So lumping it all together obscures really reality and leads policy to be built on assumptions, right, instead of the facts. So what we're trying to do is make sure that there's accurate understanding of what is legal and what is actually non-compliant. So we work with the county and the state to try to get them to understand the data. I think where some of the confusion comes in is they're pulling data from Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, and they're lumping the same listing that might be across 3 different platforms as 3 different properties. Really, it's one being advertised on 3 different platforms. So it's a lot about education and transparency and making sure that people understand. But we agree with everyone else that illegal short-term rentals, should not be part of our communities. And we work tirelessly to make sure that the regulations put in place don't over-regulate the people who are operating legally and are supporting our communities versus the people who are just taking from it.
Yeah, excellent point. And really, I'm glad to hear again that there is data, reliable data, and that, again, some of the information that we saw, and we saw a lot of it during the Bill 9 debate, was really knowingly or unknowingly exaggerated in a way that changed the discussions in many ways. So it's really important that you folks are doing this, and I commend you for doing this because I get that it's a lot of work to pull it together. But I also think, again, with this coalition, it's also going to give such a stronger voice, great consistency, lots of transparency, lots of important information that now we can reframe and change, the actual conversations because people will be more informed. So kudos to you folks for doing this. It's tremendous. The whole point for us on Bill 9, and I know for you as well, front and center of this was a housing discussion. And at the Chamber of Commerce, we always say on any given day, it's 1A and 1B, and it doesn't matter what moment it is. It might change back and forth, but it's housing and it's the economy. And it goes back and forth all the time for us, minute by minute throughout the day. And, there was an argument raised that in phasing out short-term rentals, it would automatically convert those units into long-term housing. And long-term housing that people were presuming that people wanted in short-term rentals, that they're not set up like a long-term house, but it was sort of, this is the long-term housing solution. Yet based on, available data and past experience, we question how realistic is that assumption. And we even, on our own dime, we weren't funded to do it. The Chamber put out a housing survey, and we found that it wasn't a very realistic assumption based on the responses we got from people who desperately want housing. But their needs, as they describe their needs in that survey, don't match up with what a short-term rental type of accommodation would give them in terms of what they were hoping for, in terms of really the kind of housing they desired. Tell us a little bit about your experience in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, I'd just like to acknowledge that obviously what someone decides is suitable housing for them is obviously up to them, right? And so, it's a difficult space to be in because, sure, I read the study and the conversations that I've had and the evidence from other studies across the U.S. and really even globally show exactly what yours did, right? Which is typically the type of accommodations that are included in these phase outs don't typically convert into long-term housing, whether that's owner occupied or long-term rentals, right? So data does show, and we don't even really have to look further than our own backyard and our neighbors on Oahu to see that, they did a short-term rental phase out on Oahu in places like Kailua in the North Shore. And the intent behind that phase out was that they were going to create more long-term housing and, make it more affordable, both the long-term rental rates and also the price of the homes. Well, that's been a few years now, and there's been no meaningful data to support that. So long-term rental rates have not come down in those areas. Housing prices have not come down. And there's really been no significant increase in inventory, right, for those things. So what we do see is that most places continue to sit vacant, or they convert to second homes, or the properties that do go on are typically sold again to more off-island people and not people actually living here. So the question becomes, okay, you're going to phase out this use. And for the record, you can phase out a use, but you cannot mandate that a property owner use their property as a long-term rental or sell it to a local. Those are not things you can actually mandate. So it is up to the owner at the end of the day what they decide to do with their property. As we've seen here as a result of Bill 9 in Maui County, we have seen a significant reduction in condo prices, especially in West Maui. I think the last report got down to almost 29%. It was just over 28% that the prices had dropped on condos, which is within the range that UHERO said in their economic impact report about Bill 9 was the range in which it would need to get to for locals to start purchasing properties. We have not seen that start to happen yet, but we are closely watching that data. And we have not seen, any significant increase in inventory from Minnetonka properties into the long-term housing market. The reality is that these properties were built as resort-style communities, and they come with significant carrying costs. So whether that's the mortgage, the HOA fees, the property taxes, as we know, Maui County does highest and best use for the taxes. So unless you qualify for an exemption, you are paying significantly higher taxes for real property taxes for short-term rentals. It is the highest single source revenue of real property taxes for Maui County. And so we look at all of this data and you go, okay, well, we understand that the bill was about housing, but are we going to actually achieve that goal, and at what cost to the community when you start looking at the jobs and the businesses that are impacted by the reduction in tourism? We can all agree that there should be a balance in tourism here across Hawaii, not just Maui County, but at the same time, we don't have a diversified economy that supports that yet. So when you start pulling away things without a proper runway for residents, they're the ones who end up getting hurt the most.
Exactly. And, we are still working on a long-term economic development and recovery plan. We're in the midst of it. And economic development is not a short-term game. It takes years to ramp up, to spur new industries, to spur diversification, and you have to attract major investment, either from corporations or significant government investment to attract these industries. It doesn't happen quickly. So that takes me to my next question, because I appreciate that you are, we are very reliant. I argue that Maui County, but Maui Island may be the most reliant island on the visitor industry. But, and we're talking about diversification, but we haven't gotten there. So you're looking through this alliance at the broader impacts from a business and economic standpoint. Do you think the full-scale potential impacts under Bill 9 first was well understood? I have my own opinion on that, and we talked a little bit about that. But, again, can you share with people here, the real important impacts? You started to allude to this earlier on property values, county revenue, and really the other thing that we're hearing more about, right, is the fiscal impact of the potential legal exposure, and we've had lawsuits already filed.
Yes. So the short answer to your question is I don't think that people truly understand the impacts yet. And honestly, even myself included, right? There's a lot of conversation of, we would love to be wrong. We would love for this to work and it create housing and the economy not be impacted. But the reality is that over the course of the last year and a half, during Bill 9 and now subsequently since it's passed, we haven't started to see any shifts. Again, things take time, but there's been no meaningful change. Do we think there's going to be meaningful change? Probably not. And again, I would love to be wrong. But what it comes down to is that there is a lot of data. UHERO did an economic impact report. Paul Brubaker has done an economic impact report. Cloninger and Sims has done an economic impact report on this, and they all say the same thing, which is that it's going to be damaging to Maui County. When you drill down into some of those specific data points, so let's talk about county tax revenue for a second. So again, as I mentioned previously, the real property tax classification for short-term rentals across Maui County is the largest single source revenue for Maui County budget every single year. So it's $265 million this year. That equates to just under 20% of the county operating budget. That's a significant amount of money to start taking away from. So even if you look at the conservative estimates of $60 to $70 million loss in tax revenue, we don't have anywhere to pick that back up yet. And that's really only one area of tax revenue that Maui County gets out of these transient accommodation rentals. The other side of that is you have the GE and then also the transient accommodation tax. And I don't know, maybe not all people realize, but there is a state transient accommodation tax. And then several years ago now, the counties introduced a 3% transient accommodation tax that comes directly to the counties. That money doesn't go to the state. It's 3% of the revenue that comes directly back into the Maui County budget. So again, you're talking significant millions of dollars that comes through these different tax streams into the county budget. So what does that mean? Well, it impacts directly our affordable housing fund. So your real property taxes and the Maui County transient accommodation tax are contributing back into the affordable housing fund. And again, it's the largest single source revenue for the affordable housing fund actually comes out of short-term rentals. So when you start to take away from that, and obviously we need to be building housing in addition to doing other programs throughout Maui, where are we going to make up those funds? And how are we going to do that? And right now, there's just not a plan for that. And what it looks like, downstream, and then you talk about property value losses, which also impacts the tax revenue because your taxes are done on your assessed value. And if assessed values start to go down, then obviously the tax revenue related to that goes down with it. And then as we know, owner-occupied taxes are the lowest tax classification. So you're talking about bringing that down significantly more in terms of tax revenue. And even at the long-term rental rate, which you have to have a 12-month lease minimum in order to qualify for a long-term rental property tax rate, it's bringing it down significantly, right? So you're just not making things up where you need to in order to continue to support our significant $1.558 billion budget for Maui County. So what does that mean for businesses and people working and employment throughout Maui County? I don't know about you, Pam, but the conversations that I've been having with businesses are not ideal right now. People are having to lay workers off. They're not getting the numbers, and things are not going well for companies. So as you start to reduce tourism, since it is our main economic driver, and I agree with you, I think Maui County is the most reliant on tourism in the entire state. Kauai County also is pretty heavy. And so, but you start to reduce that. And again, it's not just about short-term rentals now. You're starting to impact your restaurants, your tour operators, your small business cleaning companies, your maintenance worker. It goes down even into AC workers and construction and all of these things that depend on the diversification of this industry. And so, unfortunately, those people start to be impacted as well. And if they don't have somewhere to go and turn around and find another job, then we just continue to lose residents.
Absolutely. And, and we certainly brought that up during the discussion, but I mean, we've already lost so many of our ohana. It's really tragic. And every day, as you point out, businesses are really hurting. When you're reliant on one economic engine, and we did the best we could with the visitor industry. Obviously, we're still working on doing better with managing and looking at how to bring in more dollars and have fewer guests here, do some things to upscale and retool our visitor industry. There was so much talk about regenerative tourism and things that we were all working on. And there's different names for how we're moving forward. But again, this kind of revenue gap is huge. And on top of that, we're in a very different environment than we were when Bill 9 started. We've had so many things going on at the national level. There are so many things impacting businesses in many different ways, impacting visitors in many different ways. We're seeing fewer Japanese visitors, which was a little bit to Maui, not as great as what Oahu saw, but we're seeing a landslide in revenue issues for outside issues that are impacting Hawaii, but all of that impacts our state budget. And at the state budget, at the state level, they're very concerned about the money that used to come in from the federal government for core services that we count on, both in terms of benefits for those in need, healthcare benefits, educational, costs because we're a state and we have one state educational system, and a lot of that got federal funding. So there's a lot of discussions on where is all this money coming from? How much is the state going to be able to give to the counties? And then we're looking at, that we dinged ourselves in huge, revenue opportunities with this bill. And we're already seeing significant consequences with, as you point out, the lowering of property values, which lowers, what they would pay in taxes, as well as what we're seeing on other losses. And it just, again, this was such an emotional issue going through this because of our housing crisis, that everybody was desperate for solutions. And you and I both well understand that. We champion that. And again, to see, this loss of revenue that will impact our housing fund. And as Paul Brubaker has said, and many others have said, the messaging kept being, well, we can't build our way out of this. And the true issue is we have to build our way out of this. We have to create homes. We have to have the funds to create more homes. And those are going to be the kinds of homes that our residents want. And we have to get to things that are more affordable, that make more sense, and contribute to the real property tax base, not take away from it. And, this is a lot of education. And I appreciate that you folks are on the forefront trying to educate people on this as well. You mentioned the independent studies, and you mentioned the UHERO studies, and they talked about the potential impacts of these proposals. And you mentioned, Paul, and other studies that have been done as well. When you look at all of these studies, what does the analysis suggest about downstream effects on local businesses and the broader community and our economy? I will tell you. You asked, and what we were seeing, and we are seeing businesses call us. Yeah, they've been calling us with economic impacts with a downturn in the visitor industry before Bill 9 was signed into law. But, and especially after the wildfires. But seriously, with this bill, it's been getting worse and worse, and we get calls nearly every day. So tell us about what you're seeing and expecting from these analysis on the impacts to our businesses and the broader economy.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Pam. And it's tough to have those conversations. And to just quickly touch on your point of, how the housing and that we are in this crisis and how difficult of a conversation this is, I just really want to honor that, because this is a really difficult position to be in. And I would just want to acknowledge that as elected officials and our county workers and all of that, I can't imagine being in their shoes right now and having to deal with the housing crisis that existed before the wildfires and now post wildfires. I sat in the hearings and I listened to people's stories, and I understand how challenging it must be to look in the face of people who are truly struggling and not have an answer for them right that moment, or really even any significant plan at that point. And so I understand how we got here, but I do wish we would take a little bit more holistic approach to our policy making and really looking at the data and research and saying, hey, we get that this is happening, but we're looking at other markets and we see that they've done these things and they have not seen any significant change in their housing crisis. So how can we take that information and develop it into policy alongside these economic impact reports, realizing that Maui County and the state of Hawaii is reliant on tourism and that sector of our economy. And how does that all work together in order to move us forward into the future and create housing and opportunities for locals to thrive and not just survive here in Maui County? So, utilizing that tax revenue in a way that is supportive of the community. And granted, we have an affordable housing fund. We do have some programs in place with, down payment assistance programs and things like that. But the issue with these programs is that they're not robust enough, first of all. And then second of all, the qualifications, necessary to get into some of those programs are also very, very narrow. So we need to look at how can we reform some of these programs in order to utilize the tax revenue that we are bringing in through these significant sums of money. We're talking about a $1.558 billion budget for a relatively small county if you look at, populations across the U.S. So it shouldn't be unachievable to utilize our tax dollars in a way that is more productive. And so I think that's what we, through the economic impact reports and through the data and policy, that we would like to see, a bigger shift towards how do we utilize this and accountability of how the money is being spent currently, so that we can ensure that we are doing what's best for the community. Again, the downstream effects are just that it's not creating what they intended for it to do through the housing and those things. And so, the question starts to become, well, we went through this massive process. We created extreme division within our community over this process, and no one is really benefiting at this stage. And will they benefit is the question. And we can even go to our neighbors on Hawaii Island. They did an economic impact study as well. Last year, they were looking at short-term rental regulations over there, and they did a county-initiated economic impact report, and theirs said the same things that ours did, that if you take away this revenue source, that it is going to cause harm to businesses and property values and revenues for the county. So how do we take all of these things and move it into positive legislation? And that's really the phase that we're at now, right? Is how do we get further education and information out there so that policy decisions are being made that are beneficial for the community as a whole?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I love that. I love that you're taking this, again, a very proactive approach, putting forward valuable information. Education is key. There was so much misinformation shared. And again, it really speaks to my heart when you said, we understand, it's not that we didn't know the position that our leadership at the county was in after the wildfires with a major disaster. We already had a crisis before the wildfires, and then the loss of so many homes, as well as lives, as well as businesses. This was just such a tremendous, unexpected loss. And of course, unfortunately, that's what disasters create, which is why you really need strong plans. And we're working on that as well. But I think, again, saying, okay, well, how do we proactively move forward? And now how do we, again, revisit where we're at, what it's going to take to really get us the needed housing that is so desperately desired in the way that it's desired, in a way that we can do affordable. And then, we have to revisit all of the existing programs. We have housing programs. It's time to come up with great strategies to look at that. I'm a big data girl. I'm always looking at the return on investment. We put out an economic report on our annual Made in Maui County Festival because we think that if we're using county money, the community should understand what they get back for that money. So, really love digging deeper, looking at the reports, looking at how we actually achieve what we need to achieve, which is build more housing. How do we deal with the short-term impacts of rental prices soared as a result of the wildfires? I mean, there's so many things that we now have to consider. But it's important for us to look at the structures, look at the funding, look at how we, again, maximize the return and get us to a point where we can move forward and get more people in the housing they actually desire, which is critical. So, Caitlin and I, we're coming down to the end of our time, but we have time for one more question. Is there one more thing that you would like to quickly talk about that you think, again, as we're moving in this direction, we're working towards, working on housing, we're educating people, we need solutions. At this point, again, with the money that's going to be siphoned out, and the losses we're going to see, which is going to hamper other county programs, it's going to have to because we don't have a replacement for that money. What one overarching message would you like to share with our audience listening today? And of course, this also goes out on YouTube and Spotify. So for those who missed it, you can refer a friend and have them listen in. But what overarching message would you like to share as we wrap up today that you'd really like people to take away with them on this conversation?
That's, a big question, Pam. I always go back and forth on this one and what is the biggest thing we want to take away from this conversation. And I think the biggest thing is just that this industry of short-term rentals is not here to harm our communities. It is here to help our communities thrive. It creates an unbelievable opportunity for people in Maui County and across the state to be able to create small businesses and profit off of tourism in a way that previously residents didn't have access to. And businesses didn't have access to, because it all went through these massive corporations, through the hotels or whatever, entity that you want to talk about. And so I think really at the end of the day, this industry wants to be part of the solutions for how to improve the economy here, how to improve housing here. And we just hope that our elected officials and the people making the decisions will take a holistic approach to viewing this as an opportunity to work together and collaborate on many different housing programs that other counties across the U.S. have started using that are benefiting their communities in similar situations as Maui County. And while Hawaii is always going to be unique in its geographic location and cultural makeup and the people who live and work here, there are similarities in our housing crisis to other places across the globe, and we can use those those other experiences to help, create a more sustainable future for Maui County. So we just want to see people thrive here. And that is really our main focus, is making sure that we're part of a productive conversation surrounding that.
I so appreciate you. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for being with us on the show today. Thank you for all of the information you shared with us and the information you're putting together to share statewide to help people better understand these issues, hopefully to help other counties not fall in a trap like we did to just make a quick jump at a possible solution, only to realize that there's going to be some impacts, that we can help people get information in advance so they can move positively forward on things that will help us get to the actual goal. And I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Pam. I really appreciate you having us on today and look forward to seeing you soon.
I look forward to it as well, always. Thank you, Caitlin. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you too. Aloha.
Aloha. Well, that was a lot to cover in a short period of time. And of course, there's more to it. We could ask many more questions. Caitlin is a plethora of great information. So we're really thrilled to have her on today. I also wanted to share that upcoming is the Chamber's annual fundraiser, BizMix Maui 2026, Stetsons and Stilettos. It is our 5th annual BizMix Maui fundraiser, and it will be held on Saturday, February 28th at the stunning Grand Wailea Resort and Spa from 5:30 to 9:30 p.m. But, Gary, I'm hearing some background noise, just checking on you. Anyway, funds raised will augment the essential work that the Chamber does every day, supporting our businesses in need and creating additional programs and resources to help them, particularly in the times we just mentioned. This is a very challenging time for businesses. And, everything that impacts our economy is impacting a broad range of businesses. So what we're looking to do is take the money that we raise from this event and create additional programs to really help them. And, our work has really literally tripled in terms of business needs since the wildfires. So this is a great time where you can help support our business community by working with the Chamber. But more importantly, you can also have a great time while doing it, because Stetsons and Stilettos is going to bring a spirited blend of Western charm and island elegance. Guests will enjoy live music, themed activities, handcrafted cocktails, a multi-course culinary grazing adventure featuring creations from the top local chefs at the Grand Wailea's award-winning culinary team,
as well as some special chefs that are coming in to help us out, and a vibrant indoor-outdoor atmosphere perfect for celebration, connection, and some games. Attendees are encouraged to embrace the theme with Western-inspired attire and maybe a little glam. Boots, hats, and special glam touches are all welcome. We've got great packages available for sponsors and for people who want a table or, a number of tickets or promotional opportunities at this event because it attracts a crowd of about 200 plus people. So all of that is available at MauiChamber.com. We hope you'll look at the website, find something that meets your needs, and join us for the event. It's going to be a great time. And now I'm so thrilled that we're going to have
I'm
Melissa.
I'm still trying to reach her, Pam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
She didn't answer, and her voicemail is full, so I couldn't leave a voicemail. So I just texted her, and hopefully she will call us back.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. Well, while we're working on it, I'll tell you a little bit about her, and we're going to hope that we can bring her on. With the weather, with some power outages, we've had some people's phones who are dead. We're all using our cell phone these days, so we've had some phones that were dead. We've had, as Caitlin said, Caitlin has a power outage that's been going on overnight. So, we understand with the winds and the rain we've had, maybe there's a little bit of a challenge, but while we try to get Melissa on, let me tell you a little bit about her, because what I'd like to share, even if she doesn't make it on today, is a little bit about her organization, just in case. Melissa co-founded Ohana Strong in 2016 when a friend came to her with this idea. In 2018, they took over running an event that had been around. It was she was really involved in getting involved in this event. She had 15 plus years as a massage therapist and 5 years teaching yoga for cancer patients. So she's always been committed to helping those around her heal, grow, and thrive. But what they created was Ohana Strong, which is a nonprofit dedicated to community support by empowering local families and fostering a circular economy. They facilitate a clothing exchange by collecting new and gently used clothing, books, toys, games, and baby items, which they distribute for free. So they created this amazing little thrift store, but imagine going into a thrift store, but at no cost. So you can go in and get the things that you need for your family. And so she, after taking on this running event, she started moving into this arena and started helping our community. And of course, this comes at a time when we've had many in need. And their mission is to create donation opportunities that provide families with access to essential resources, including items for Keiki. So they focus on mutual aid and collaborating with other nonprofits. They work with over 15 local nonprofits each year to help provide items for families, as well as some of the nonprofit participants. Plus, they take in items that are no longer usable, and then they create new uses for those items. So they look at things that they can do with other items to, for example, create specialty products. They take old stained towels and blankets to the Humane Society or take them to the vet clinic. They look at other things that maybe are in fill materials that can be reused. And they create just so many amazing products. Helping both, keeping our Ohana strong, and that's what the name of the organization is, that positively affect Maui residents with everything they do. And there's so many pressing needs right now. So there's so many ways that people can contribute to Ohana Strong and be a part of this movement. So it sounds like, Gary, we haven't gotten Melissa Eisenhart on.
No, not yet. Point. I'm still trying.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you doing that. As we hope to get her on, I would like to share a little bit about what's been going on at the Chamber. This is a really wild time for us because we do work on both sides of county and state legislation. We're very actively involved at the county level. We're very actively involved when the legislative session is going on, which is January through May. And of course, we have a little bit more time. You usually get, 7 days of advance posting within county bills and things that we need to take up, matters that we address.
But things go very quickly at the legislative session. Often you have posting with 2 days' notice. It moves quickly. The process moves from one committee to another throughout the process. And there are thousands of bills to go through this year. This is also what we would call a carryover bill. And that means that we have bills from last year that are still live and carried over to this year's session. So it is a lot of different topics, a lot of things going on, huge focus, of course, on what's happening at the national level in terms of how what's going on at the national level is impacting our funding and will impact our funding. Of course, great efforts to sustain critical services for our state residents and to look at ways that we can alleviate some of the national cuts, looking at some of the rainy day funds and things that we would use to help support the challenges that we see coming, as well as just a flurry of bills that we see every year that are looking at how we improve Hawaii, how we address concerns, how we mitigate challenges. Of course, housing is top of mind statewide. So a lot of discussions on housing. There have been some things come up that, there's more discussion now of FBI investigation where they were looking at what was going on with some campaign contributions and how, considering how money was being given to different people, in the legislature. So there's a new investigation now going on that's been heightened and some news that came out last night. I won't really go into the news, but that took up some time as bills were introduced to look at, how do we address what happened in that situation, who was involved, what money was involved, how do we resolve this, how do we make sure that we understand the issue and we make sure that doesn't happen again. And that impacted Maui because one of our legislators was involved in that. So there's been some distractions that are going on as we've been working this legislative session to move forward on key issues. And there is going to be a lot of great debate and a lot of things that we're looking at where we're saying, okay, we've got some challenges. We need to fix a lot of things and we need to look at ideas. And there are a lot of ideas being thrown out because statewide we need to look at diversifying our economy. We're looking at new things like sports tourism, which is great and lends to a lot of the assets that Hawaii has. But we also have to look at what's occurring in some of these things. And I'll give you an example, which is the Maui Invitational. We have loved having the Maui Invitational and this amazing basketball tournament. But now we've got a challenge where Las Vegas would also love to have those basketball teams playing in Las Vegas. And they're looking to put up huge amounts of money to attract those teams to play there instead of playing here in Maui. So just in this one example, which does leverage our tourism industry, which does bring in significant revenue for Maui during the time that the tournaments are here. In addition, that our youth get to get involved in activities, our nonprofits get involved in activities and are able to make some revenue out of this. There's so many holistic things that come out of some of these events that leverage not only the dollar investment that comes back into Maui County or the state, but also what it brings to our broader community, how it supports other businesses as well. So as we're looking at this, there's a lot of discussion this year, given other funding losses, really to focus on the return on investment. As we look to develop new programs, as we look to leverage other ways to expand economic impact, and shore up some of the financial losses we may see at the federal level, we're really having to more closely examine what these different programs bring, what is the positive impact, what are some of the negative impacts, and really try and achieve the best return on investment. And all of this has also certainly heightened something we've been championing for years, and that is to really drive diversification and sustainability, which is desperately needed. We have to have a business-friendly climate. And that was highlighted with our top leaders, with Governor Green, Senate President, Senate President Ron Kochi, our House Speaker, we were all there at a meeting where we were briefed by CNN, who does a report that we show every year that indicates that we are 49th in the nation in terms of a business-friendly environment and things we can do. And everybody is rallying around how important it is to have a business-friendly environment as the baseline for all the things that we're trying to achieve to support our businesses, to keep family here in Hawaii, and to diversify our economy in a way that will sustain us for many years to come. And so that's sort of a linchpin. And as we talked about today, you really have to understand the economics. It's so important to understand the broader impacts that sustain our community over time, whether it's short-term rentals, whether it's our tourism industry, whether it's expanding into new areas of programs or high tech. We need to look at the investment that is being made. We need to look at how it solves the solutions that we so desperately need. And we have to look at long-term impacts. And really, more analysis needs to be done as we're examining these different programs. And also, in the nonprofit world, when you're giving, I used to run Maui United Way before working at the Maui Chamber of Commerce. When you're giving to a nonprofit, research them a little bit. Understand what their carrying cost is. What we call our G&A in business or our administrative costs when you're running a nonprofit. Look at how much of your dollar is going to supporting the nonprofit or to supporting the cause that you're wanting to fund. Take a look at the overhead and understand that, and nonprofits are required to publish that. So find out more about that as well, and get involved in the community. Get involved in the discussions that we're going to be having, because this is a critical time, and your voice really matters. This is our time to make a difference, help turn Hawaii in a great direction, and move us positively forward for a more sustainable Maui County and state of Hawaii. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm sorry we weren't able to get Melissa of Ohana Strong on. Great program. Hopefully we'll get her on again soon. In the meantime, have a blessed day. Stay warm, stay dry. And we hope if you're without power, it comes back soon. We're thinking of you. Blessings and aloha.